Hi, Drunvalo.
Hi, how are you?
I'm Ishaya.
Mishaya, that's a beautiful name.
She's going to sing a song specially for you. Here she comes.
Oh boy.
I pray for the children. I pray for the child. I pray for my inner child. I pray for my child.
Wow. Goed gedaan. I'm going to give her a high five. Hartstikke mooi.
That was beautiful.
Hello, dear listeners. This is John Consemulder, your radio host for Healing Sound Movement Radio. And the website, of course, is www.healingsoundmovementradio.com. And our other website is worldpeacechild.com. And it's been a hectic but very interesting weekend, and also today where we are recording, because we went to the Secret Space Program Symposium, and we met Richard Dolan, Richard Hoagland, Ed Grimsley, and I lost now the other speaker, but they were all interesting, and they talked about anti-gravity, free energy, and the Secret Space Program. So besides the regular program NASA is having, and we just came out of traffic, and we are now going live to our special guest today, which was already planned months before. And it's an honor and a privilege because I just found out a few days ago that my guest, and I'm going to introduce him in a minute, just has time now, and it won't be doing any radio and TV promotion, I thought, until the end of August because of something which was dropped back on his lap, so to speak. So he will be very busy the coming months. So I'm honored and privileged, but now I know we have this opportunity which will not pass us by in the coming months again. So who is my special guest for tonight? It's Drunvalo Melchizedek. And if you did not hear yet what his work is about and his message is about, go to drunvalo.net. So www.drunvalo.net. And I would like to welcome to this show. So welcome, Drunvalo.
Thank you, John. I'm really happy to be here with you today.
Well, likewise, because I'm very happy I made it with all this 3D traffic.
Very good.
We already talked a little bit. For people who do not know your story, and I have to tell you, it's a very interesting and fascinating story, and I think a very important story. Now, I'm not sure how your relationship is now. Maybe you can tell about it, because 5 years ago, I think my wife Renske gave me the book, and I bought it. Well, I found it actually 2 days ago in a secondhand shop in English because she had it in Dutch, and it's a book by Bob Frizell. Nothing in this book is true, but it's exactly how things are. Well, what a great title, of course, to put you off and to interest you at the same time. And my interest in your work started actually with this book, because 90% what was written in this book is about your work. So how do you know Bob Frizell? How did he come to write?
Oh yeah, sure. He came to a workshop, and I guess he was very excited about what he heard, and he went home and wrote that book. I didn't know he wrote it. After he wrote it, then he sent me a copy. But the book went all around the world. It's in, I don't know how many, probably 30 languages or something. And so it was a good thing for me. It helped. And so now he's a facilitator, a Flower of Life facilitator. So he actually teaches this work around the world as well as his own work too.
Okay. Now, talking about Flower of Life, because let's get into that right away, because you do Flower of Life workshops. Well, you did them, and I believe sometimes there were even 6 days intensive workshops. But of course, the Flower of Life is a derivative of higher dimensional information related to sacred geometry. So could you, for the general listeners, state your definition of what is sacred geometry and why is that geometry, or those relationship between numbers and frequencies, and maybe the interrelationship between sound, light, and energy so sacred? What makes geometry sacred?
Well, there are certain proportions and patterns and designs that are geometrical in nature, that every single thing, without exception, in the entire universe are created from. And even things you wouldn't imagine. I mean, you can see that crystals are made from geometry because the atoms arrange themselves into geometrical patterns. And those kinds of things are pretty obvious. But a lot of things like feelings, like love and fear, and these kinds of things, they're also geometrical. It was Manfred Klein who figured this out. I wasn't the one who did it, but he was able to determine that emotions are geometrical. So there's a three-dimensional geometrical form you can hold in your hand, and that's love. And with every single emotion, there's a different geometrical form that represents that. It actually, the energy of love or any other feeling moves according to those geometrical patterns. And then there's a huge key in all of this that science is just figuring out now, and the rest of the world basically has almost no idea at all. But once you understand what sacred geometry is, once you understand it, you can take any subject in existence, any words that you can say, and break it down into its geometrical components. And then once you've done that, you can then switch to a completely different subject that doesn't seem to have any relationship at all. You can take like music and medicine, for example. And most people say, well, what do they have to do with each other? But once you understand the geometry of music and you understand the geometry of medicine and how that works, you can link the two together, and you can actually make music that heals, or that you can make medicine when it's really helping the body, which is actually music. And you can do this with anything. And it makes you a genius. This is why Leonardo da Vinci is considered so intelligent. It isn't that he was so intelligent. He understood sacred geometry, and he also understood the flower of life, which is the key. And because of that, he was able to do things that look like he's just a super genius, but he was not. I mean, he was smart, but he wasn't a super genius. What made him seem that way is because he understood the patterns of the universe, and that was and so really that's all it is. It's just that we live in a geometrical world, and numbers and these kinds of things, mathematics. This is another thing. Scientists believe that mathematics is the underlying essence of the universe. But from someone who knows sacred geometry, they know that's not true. There is no numbers and there is no mathematics whatsoever without a relationship to sacred geometry. Sacred geometry creates all the mathematics in the existence. And so numbers are secondary to sacred geometry.
Could I say, Drunvalo, that it's more about the ratios between different frequencies than the frequencies themselves as separate unities?
It's the proportion, the ratios and proportions. Yes, it's like in the golden mean is one of the primary sacred geometrical forms of the universe. It is probably, if you had to come up with what is the most important one, that's probably the most important one. And yet it doesn't exist in nature, which is really kind of interesting. But all of nature is based on it. But it's just a geometrical form that's called an infinite geometrical progression, where when you get a golden mean rectangle, once you pick one, if you make a square out of whatever the shorter edge is, and you make a square out of that, what's left over is another golden mean rectangle. And if you make another square out of that one, another golden mean rectangle is left over, and it'll rotate at 90 degrees going down forever and ever and ever. And it'll go out the other way also. So if you have a golden mean rectangle and you add a square onto it, it'll keep doing that, going out the other way forever and ever and ever. It'll go it creates the macrocosm, and it creates the microcosm. And it is,
Throughout fractality?
yes.
Okay, so it's a spirals which have a fractal relationship. Okay, now you talked about love, the geometry of love or other emotions. Now I think I have a clue, and I also think about the work of cymatics and sound vibration,
Hmm.
also
Yes,
related.
they're related. They're
Yes,
very related.
and also the example you gave as sound medicine, so to speak, like an
Hmm.
energetic homeopathy. But for
Yes.
some general listener who might not know how sacred geometry works, can you tell the listeners how the geometry of love is formed or has been proved by this research that you just mentioned at the beginning?
Manfred Klein,
Yes.
the way he discovered that was they were trying to see if there was a frequency to love or to hatred or to joy or to all these different emotions that we can, or feelings and emotions that we have. And he put somebody, I think he was using an EKG, I'm not sure, but he put somebody into a room and had them experience different feelings. And I don't really know how he was triggering those feelings from them. And then in another room, there was a computer that was linked to that, so the person that was in the other room could not know what was actually happening. They were just a scientist, and they discovered that there were very specific wavelengths that were and what we call waveform, which is a little bit more than just a wavelength. It's like a sine wave signature.
Hmm.
Only it's to really do it, you have to do it three-dimensional, which is waveform. And and so they discovered these waveform patterns that came off of emotions. And so at that point, the scientists in the other room could tell another scientist somewhere else exactly what this person in this other room that he's not even looking at, he could tell by looking at the waveform exactly what he was feeling. He
Wow.
could tell that. Well, then it's just a matter of once you know the waveform, it's just a matter of breaking that down into its geometrical components, and which point you end up with geometry that is behind it all. And that's how they figured it out.
Is this research related, and also your research maybe, related to Dan Winter's work and Heart Coherence team's work, or is there a major difference in trying to research the geometry of
Um,
emotions?
well, Dan Winter also came up to that same conclusion, but from a different, slightly different point of view, and his work is very, very good. I mean, there's many people, there's many sacred geometrists out there that are excellent, that have made huge strides for humanity. I'm just one. There's a lot of other ones. I happen to be the one that kind of made it popular, because it wasn't very popular for a long
Hmm.
time.
Yes.
But that's really all I did. I mean, there's other people that have done much greater work than me on these levels. And but Dan's work has tied in with heart math, which is in Stanford, and the geometries of the heart and are key at this point to us understanding the relationships of the heart to everyday life and to humanity. Um, what they're finding is amazing. I mean, Stanford has discovered that the heart, which we think is just an organ in our body, is way more important than we've ever thought of before.
Hmm.
And it's when you juxtapose it to the brain, for a long time, we thought it put out the most powerful energy fields there are. But now Stanford has discovered that the heart puts out an energy field far more powerful and bigger than the brain ever. It's about 8 to 10 feet in diameter around the body, and it's what's called a torus, or a toroidal field. And there's two of them. There's one inside the other. And this was one of the first new things that we've discovered about the human body in about 300 years. There are a few others now that they're discovering, but pretty much we knew the body 300 years ago, and we're now just beginning to understand it in ways that we never have before.
Now,
Yeah.
now we enter the field of non-local consciousness and magnetic phenomena and electromagnetic phenomena, maybe even torsion fields or scalar electromagnetic. Some research are talking about. But to make it very clear for our listeners, and also to start maybe the next question and the next discussion, so to call it, it's interesting that these are energetic or transfer of information field principle, because the hard magnetic field goes outside of the body, so that means non-locality. Does this field of research relate, or is it affiliated with, in one way or another, your work and also your insights? Of course, not just the research, but also what you receive intuitively or channel or from your higher self or whatever we want to call it for now. Is that related to what we might call light body activation, and maybe even the merkaba?
Oh, yes. Well, in truth, what becomes clear through this study of sacred geometry is that absolutely everything is related to everything else, and the end result is that the entire universe is one living being. There is everything is alive, and everything is consciousness. It's just on different levels. Some of it we can understand, and some of it we can't. But it is definitely all linked together. And so the merkaba is an even bigger energy field than what is produced by the heart, but that is produced in a different. It has a different purpose. That is actually created by the brain, but it's not that. When I was saying it's not the fields that science knows, they're just understanding this right now. I was the first person on Earth to actually describe this geometrically and mathematically, or at least in modern times. I believe that a long time ago they knew this, but in the last few hundred years, I'm the first person.
Is this a
But
field that can be measured, by the way?
oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It is an electromagnet. There's an energy. Let's describe it first. There's an energy field around the body that is proportionate to the body. And so your height determines how big that field is, and the field for a person that's about 6 feet is approximately 60 feet in diameter, and from the center of your body at the base of the spine, almost at the base of the spine, and it ends. This field is a sphere that out at 60 feet. And inside of that sphere, there is all these geometrical relationships that are so dense that if you were to put it onto a computer screen, you can barely find a place where there's a hole that goes all the way through. There's so much energy coming off of it, and in so many different ways. And but that energy field is for most people not functioning. It is like a seed. It holds all the potential, but it isn't working. It's just sitting there. It's not moving. It's not doing anything. It requires something, just like a seed requires water and earth and light. This requires um, a connection, a conscious connection to it, and very specific ways of breathing and certain things you do with your mind and your heart that cause this field to begin to spin in opposite directions in counterclockwise, counter rotating ways.
How come this is so, by the way, before you go on with your story, because I think this is a very important point. But how come this is so that we have that potential, but it needs to be activated in the first place, so to speak?
Well, all life forms that we can find have this pattern. It's a pattern. It's a very, very precise pattern that is around the body, and it's electromagnetic in nature. By the way, sits at about 4 degrees Kelvin for the scientists out there. It's It's a very weak field, and what was that last question? I already lost it. I'm sorry.
Oh, but I almost lost it when you asked that question back. Let's see. Oh, yeah. I was thinking, well, it sounds as if it needs to be activated. It's in a dormant
Oh
state,
yes,
so to speak. So
yes.
why is it that it's not, whatever the function is, and we'll talk about that, why is it working in the first place? So as a base condition, so to speak.
Well, it like I said, it's like a seed, and so seeds are just they have everything in them to make a tree or a plant or whatever it is. They have the blueprint inside there for whatever that thing is. For a human being, we have this seed, and we're inside the seed, and it's around us. We can't see it, but it's there, and you can put it on a computer screen. So it's not that we can't realize the truth of it. It's just that we don't know it. Most people don't, and it sits inactive over long periods of time. And we believe it's a couple 100,000 years or so, something at least 100,000 years of continuous life. Even if you're reincarnating over and over, but it takes a long time for one person to reach this level, but eventually it automatically happens. It just begins to grow, and the fields begin to grow, and as they do, we go up in consciousness. We become something more than human. But we did reach this. Humanity reached this level, and then about 13,000 years ago, we lost it. It's debatable why we lost it. Different people have different ideas. We misused energy. Different things that could have happened or may have happened, but we did lose it. And when we lost it, we became almost like barbarians again. And it took us about 6,000 years to be able to evolve enough so that we could begin to understand this again. That's when the ascended masters allowed our memories to begin to come back. That's when civilization, as we see it now, began to happen. And then now we're just at the point where this field we can really begin to activate this field back again. Once the field is up and once it's running, it doesn't look like it does with a normal person. They begin to spin, and a disc comes out at the base of the spine that is about 60 feet in diameter. And if you photograph it, and you can do this, it would look like a flying saucer.
Exactly.
But what it actually looks like, if you take the one, there are many different kinds of galaxies, but if you take what's called a sombrero galaxy, one that looks the one that's most the average one, the normal one, the proportions, the shape, and the size of the field that's around that galaxy is identical to what's around a human being when their merkaba is rotating. And it's just and it is the basic energy field of every single thing in existence. Every single thing, no matter what it is, I don't care what it looks like or anything else like that, it came from the same patterns and the same exact pattern that's around the human being. And we can prove that. We can scientifically prove that. It's not just me saying this. And you can take any living thing, whether it's a dog or a horse or a bird or anything else, and from their proportions, you can determine exactly where they linked into that field geometrically. And from there, you can determine everything about that life form just by looking at the geometry. I mean, all of its potential, what levels of consciousness that it's possible to make from there, how it sees the reality, everything. You can. It's even if you were coming from space and you'd never seen Earth before, you can determine that from every single life form on Earth just by looking at the proportions and shapes and sizes of these different living things and where they connect into this one living pattern that's around everything. And it's an exciting science. It really is. And but we don't know much. The only people in the world that really are studying this in any real depth is Russia and the United States, and Germany and Japan and China and India are now beginning to study this also. Russia uses this pattern, which is called the merkaba, and I know this for sure because I've been. Well, I probably shouldn't say exactly how I know this, but I know this for sure from Russia. But it's their defense system for their entire military is based on this. You could never beat Russia right now if you attack them, and they put up the merkaba field to defend against themselves. It would be impossible to beat them, no matter what your force is.
That sounds as if it's like a Tesla field or something. Are these
Oh,
related?
Tesla is just a tiny little piece inside of the merkaba. It's just a little tiny thing. The merkaba is the pattern that the entire creation was created from. That's for sure, because it's around every single thing. It's around every galaxy. It's around every sun, every planet, every moon, every single living thing on the surface of a planet, every atom, every molecule. There's no exceptions anywhere.
So is it? Can I reinterpret this as a life-generating or at least life-facilitating geometric blueprint? Blueprint? Is that it, or is it more to it?
Well, it is the blueprint, but it is also the cosmic DNA itself is connected to this. So every word we're saying right now is already been determined by the geometry. This not, when you start getting to these levels, it gets hard for people to understand. But really, everything that has ever occurred or ever will occur is already written down inside the geometry. You can determine it.
And also in life, because that creates problems for people who are now listening and thinking, "Hey, I thought I had free will."
Well, it doesn't look like there is any. The only thing is that what's interesting uh, is that there are certain geometrical places in time, space, and dimension where it is possible to take a different route. But even if you do take that different route, it's already been determined that you did it.
Hmm.
I know.
Talking about talking
I,
about options and quantum uncertainties. That's another level. Yeah.
well, there from this way of seeing things, there is no probabilities. There just is what is.
Mm-hmm.
And but and uh, the scientific way of perceiving things that we now are holding, I believe within the next few years, not very long, I give it about 5 more years, everything that we know scientifically is going to be thrown out and discarded, and a whole new system is going to come in. It'll be based on sacred geometry, but there are countries now. Russia, for example, has a new system of the unified field theory that is so extraordinary that they can tell you with certainty where every proton is in the entire universe at any one moment and where it'll be at any time in the future. So
Is this related to the torsion physics, Garayev, Kozyrev, those kind of Russian scientists?
no, it's not.
It's not.
Uh,
Okay.
these were about 30 Russians who figured this one out, and one German, and when they did it, it was right when Russia was falling apart, and they decided to keep it secret for a long time. They're just now letting this come out, and they're letting it come out through Germany, not through Russia. And about 2 years ago, they just gave a proof of this to 500 world scientists, which I'm sure are probably at this. All those 500 people are probably rethinking everything that they've ever thought. For example, they chose communications to begin with. You could you could put this theory into any form of technology, but they chose communications. And what they did is they took two computers and they linked them together, not through any electromagnetic fields. There's electromagnetics and electronics and magnetism inside the computer, but the way that the two computers communicated was not with electromagnetic fields. There was no wires or anything to do with that. They communicated through gravity. And once you plug one computer into the gravity field and you plug the other one into the gravity field, it doesn't matter where they are. They are one computer. There is no time. It's actually calculated at zero. The time between it takes to get from the information from one computer to another, once it leaves the computer and it's into the gravity field, it's into the other computer simultaneously.
Like entanglement, but then on a macro scale?
I'm not sure.
Well,
I'm not.
in the microphysics, so to speak, the subquantum world and so on, you have entanglement when once these subatomic particles were one, but they were split, the one is immediately connected to the other one, no matter where it's going, so to speak.
Well, it may be that that's the link is the gravitation. What the gravity, it isn't only, it's not just time either. The distance doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So those two computers can be 16 billion light years away, and it's still zero time to communicate between the two. There's no time because there, once it's into the gravity field, gravity is everywhere, and it is one thing. And when you're connected into it, it doesn't matter where you extract out of. The whole field knows it instantly.
My intuition was when you said Germany, I thought of global scaling, but now you're talking further. I'm not sure if that's it.
Well, yeah, global scaling is how it was first introduced. Yes, and that is, they're throwing those words away now, and they're changing it pretty dramatically at this point. But yeah, it was out of Munich, and it was global scaling.
So the work of Hartmut, Müller, and so on. Yeah. Well, it might be interesting because I just contacted them, and they want to also do a radio special. First, they were a little bit cautious, of course. Who are you, John, and what are you going to talk about? But now, at least, they gave their permission to talk about this work. So this might be an interesting lead here.
Well, it's a really amazing thing. I spent a long time studying what they're doing, and it's extraordinary. It really is.
And there's also a resonance, so to speak, cosmic resonance to what you just said, because I heard you say the word cosmic DNA. Now, to someone listening who thinks I know a little bit about my body and DNA, but what's the DNA of the cosmos? Now, I know a little bit of the work about the work of Len Horowitz and also relating to the work of Hartmut Müller, and they also talk about as if there's a cosmic cycle, a cosmic wave, so in a way a frequency cycle, which at its node points, its highs and its lows, so to speak, is related to cosmic timing of cycles relating to our DNA. Is this something you mean when you talk about cosmic DNA?
Well, that's one way of perceiving it, and there are probably, as I've been studying these kinds of things, there's probably other ways of perceiving it that we may not even know about.
Mm-hmm.
But the universe does transmit information instantaneously everywhere at certain times that causes changes to take place everywhere that is intelligent. It is moving in a predetermined way, is what it appears. Exactly like a DNA molecule. And so where we're going, that's a different subject. I mean, that, I have my ideas about that, etc. But where we ultimately are going beyond this, I don't think anybody knows anywhere.
No,
I really don't.
Now we're talking about where we're going, but maybe it's also nice to tell our general listeners where we come from and also where you come from. And I think that's an interesting story because when I first read this, I was quite flabbergasted, as I think most people will be. But you talk, if I'm correct, you came in through one planet and then you stayed there for a few lifetimes, if I can put it like this, and then came in through another planet. It seemed to be like a whole kind of planet hopping, all so to speak.
Well,
And I'm taking this very seriously, but I'm giving a metaphor here. But can you tell the listeners how that worked for you, how you came into this body here on life, and how this is for most humans, how that differs?
Well, at this moment, there are many, many, many people here that are not from Earth. In fact, there's more people here not from Earth than there are from Earth. And what I mean by from Earth, you've been here a long time. And but if you notice, the population has grown higher than ever before. That, as far as, and even our Earth records don't show that there's ever been this many bodies on Earth before. And these people are coming from other levels of existence. The reason they're coming here is because there's something going on here on Earth that is going to affect every last life form in existence. And we've become very important. I mean, in the bigger picture, we're just another grain of sand on a beach, just another planet. But something's happening here that's unique, that's never happened before, and it's attracting the attention of life everywhere.
And what is that? What is happening here, which is unique?
Well, it has to do with evolution and the speed of evolution. We don't know it, but we are evolving extremely fast. relative to all the rest of the planets everywhere else. Only a little over 100 years ago, we were riding around on horses, and the idea of going to the moon would just be unbelievable. No one would ever even consider that as a possibility ever for maybe a million years in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been evolving extremely fast. You can take the Encyclopedia Britannica, and in there they talk about this, that in the year 1900, they measured how many bits of information we had known since the beginning of civilization with the Sumerians about 6,000 years ago. And they came up with a certain number of bits of knowledge that we had learned. But then they found that between 1900 and 1950, in 50 years, we learned as many bits of information as we did in 6,000 years. And then from 1950 to these are approximate numbers, about 1950 to about 1970, we doubled it again. And then from about 1970 to about 1980, we doubled it again. And then it started going really fast. And that's when NASA was to a place where the information was coming in so fast that they couldn't even get it into their computers. They were 9 years behind being able to put it into the computers. And now it is going so fast that we're doubling the amount of information we know, something like about every month or two. And so you can see just on an intuitive level that something very unusual is going on right now. We think it's just normal to walk around with a cell phone that we can talk to anybody on the planet with, but these kinds of understandings don't happen in this quick normally. They happen this fast because different ETs were giving us this knowledge. Normally, it takes a long time to understand all of this. But we are evolving. That's just one way of looking at it. But on other levels, the way that we are perceiving the reality, the way that we see it with the Hubble telescope and what we're understanding on all these kinds of levels, and how we're beginning to understand how stars are born and how everything is getting together, what we're doing is we're evolving really fast. And this evolution is about to culminate in the next couple of years. If we're correct, we're going to become something more than human. That is, if we can survive this thing. Because right now, I mean, the whole world is practically being torn apart because of this, just simply because of this evolution. Especially the older cultures that are just wanting to be who they are and being faced with this new technology and this new way of being that is, it's a clash between the old and the new. But I believe we will make it, and there's going to come a day very soon in the future where we're going to look human. We're going to look just like we are now, but our perception of the reality is going to be so different than it is nothing like humanity has ever had before. And we're just going to understand a lot more. And it's only the beginning, because that evolution isn't just going to go there and stop and wait for another million years or something. It's going to keep going and keep evolving. And this is what the universe is excited about. And that's why so many people have come here and become part of the human race, because they want to experience it directly. There aren't very many things under the sun that are new, and this is new. This is very rare.
Okay, now some people are saying that we have these Mayan prophecies in 2012, and the feeling, at least, of acceleration of time, or maybe the cosmos facilitating as the ether changes, so to speak. But there are also people saying, well, you know what, that we get some help sometimes of the ETs, and although the Hopi prophecy is saying we are the ones we've been waiting for, so they won't release us of our karma and our cosmic goals individually, but they are helping out sometimes to facilitate or to speeden up the process. Could this mean that these are future beings helping us in this time reference? Well, it's maybe Drunvalo now, or John in the future, or mankind in general as a future prospect. So is those ETs, is that us in the future, or do you see that as a different kind of phenomena?
Actually, almost every imaginable thing you can think of and things that you can't even think of are happening at the same time. There's lots of different ways of interpreting the reality and different ways, especially with time and space and dimension. We look at time linearly. We see it as past, present, and future. Because we're a polarized brain and polarized consciousness, everything we see is broken into three. There's a hot, cold, and warm. There's up, down, and middle. There's male, female, and child, and it keeps going on and on and on and on. But so when it comes to space, it's X, Y, Z axis, and when it comes to time, it's past, present, and future. But when we leave polarity consciousness, and we are going to leave that very soon, we're going to enter into a very specific form of unity consciousness where we don't see polarity anymore, but we see everything as one living thing, and we're not going to. It's going to blow your mind, but we're not going to see the universe the way we see it now at all. It's not going to be something separate from us. It's going to be part of us. And in a way that right now it's pretty hard to explain. But, and when we do see it in that unity consciousness, time won't have past, present, and future. All things, time will be spherical, you might say. And both past, present, and future are all happening at once, and you can be anywhere you want, and you can experience it at any level you want. And there are from Melchizedek consciousness, we know that there is a little over 100,000, it's about 100,200 different forms of unity consciousness that have been created by people somewhere. And so we're just starting out with the very first one, but it's going to seem like a huge jump. It's going to feel really good, but it's going to feel, my God, what has happened? This is amazing. And I mean, what's about to happen to humanity is a blessing. It's incredible, and it is it is a gift straight from the source. And so, I mean, I'll do whatever I can to try to explain this, but it is not easy. It's not going to be easy to understand until we get there. Once we get there, we'll go, oh, yeah. And then you're going to go, I remember this. Because we've all been there before, a long time ago.
So the understanding comes when the experience enters, so to speak.
Yes, then it just feels, and you remember the feeling, and you remember what it is, and then it's just it begins to unfold. At which point, it's easy for us to change. The rest of the evolutionary pattern that we're on is not a problem. The only part is this first step, which is going from polarity consciousness back into a form of unity consciousness. From then on in, it'll be really easy. Not only easy, but enjoyable. It feels really good as you begin to make these changes.
Okay, now talking about change, what is the evolutionary blueprint? I know this answer to this question is not an easy or short one, but is it that we have to become light bodies? Is it that we have to realize we are the extraterrestrials who are maybe now helping us out and they are our higher selves? Or is it a different kind of cosmic blueprint?
Well, what this cosmic blueprint is, even the most advanced souls in this universe know it to a level. They know what it is in terms of how it's structured, and they know what it is on many, many, many levels. But when it comes to the actual experience of where it takes us, we can't say that, because the universes are what they are, is their music. They're all based on the harmonics of music, everything, and they're created relative to each other in the frequencies that separate them is identical to the difference in the cycles per second in music. It's exactly the same, and so as we go, our universe of dimensions, there's 144 dimensions in this particular universe. There's 12 primary ones. There's 12 overtones producing 144 overtones, plus the whole thing comes up to 144. And that's exactly the same as a chromatic scale. and it is one octave. But there are octaves below us, and there's octaves above us, and it's technically it's infinite. And we have been studying this one for billions of years. But what's about to happen is we're about to enter into another octave of universes at the very base of which would be the base chakra, where we're going to enter in as babies, and we don't know what that is yet. At least from the Melchizedek consciousness inside this universe here does not know uh, very much about it. That's where I came from. That's why I came here. That's why they sent me here, because I contain within me a little bit of that first vibration. I don't contain all of it. I'm just starting on that level, but and then I had to erase all the memories except for 11 seconds. I have 11 seconds of the frequency, so I know what it is, but I couldn't come here. I couldn't come down this low and survive. It's too painful, and so I had to erase, you might say, the feeling of being on those levels, except for a little tiny bit. But then coming down here, you were asking me about planet jumping. When I left there are no planets and stars in that level. It's a whole different way of existing. And when I left there and came here, I was picked up by my great 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 grandfather, Machivinda Melchizedek, and taken from. I came out of the Crab Nebula, which is directly behind the center star of the Belt of Orion, and that's a portal between these two worlds. And I came out of there and was taken to the Pleiades. And then in the Pleiades, I spent, it wasn't lifetimes, I spent 15 Earth years there in time.
Okay.
And what happens is when you're coming from another level, you don't know where you're going. You don't know what it's like, and you have to learn. It's like going down in the ocean. You gotta go down so far, and you gotta stop and adjust. Then you can go down a little farther, and you gotta adjust. Or if you're going up in a mountain, you go up a little bit, and you have to stop and adjust to the altitude. And it's a similar kind of thing. And everybody has to go to the Pleiades, because the Pleiades is the solar plexus of this galaxy, and it links everything to everything. And so you have to go there. The Pleiades is just a huge university, really what it is. And people going from A to B, from one star to another, can't just go to that one star, because they won't be able to function when they get there. And so they have to go through the Pleiades to go through a school to do certain training before they can get to that other place, be able to function on those other levels. In this case, after Pleiades, I had to go to Sirius, because Sirius is intimately connected to our star here right now. And I spent time there, and then from there I came down to the Earth, and I arrived here in 1840. So yeah, I am literally an ET, but I'm also an IT, This is even. I probably shouldn't even get into this, but there's life inside the planet as well as outside the planet.
Well, go into that. Now you made me now you made me very, very interested. Yes. In the inner Earth, you mean, in the crust itself?
Well, the inner Earth and inner suns and inner galaxies and all these things are something that we don't know yet. There is one person, Nassim Haramein, who's a scientist, a physicist, who's just now beginning to unfold the sacred geometry around this and beginning to give the geometrical patterns to describe this. But before that, science had no understanding of this at all. They just thought it was a big rock. Well, that's not the way life is at all. We're not even, our scientific understanding of what we think the reality is not even close. We are so far away from the truth, it's crazy. The external world, the external stars and planets and galaxies and everything are part of us, and we're creating them. We're creating them from our brain patterns. They don't actually exist in the way that we think they do. And there is another universe inside the center of the Earth, and inside the sun, and inside the moon, and inside every single planet and star, and inside every galaxy. It's the nature of a star tetrahedron coil, which was used in in the Navy, when they tried to do the Montauk or the Philadelphia
Oh
experiment,
yeah,
excuse me,
with the Eldridge.
uh,
Yeah.
they were just beginning to understand that they wrap coils in star tetrahedrons to produce that kind of energy, but they didn't know what the star tetrahedron actually looked like when it goes into a toroidal field, which is two toroidal fields that wrap in at the equator. And anyway, if you were to go into the center of the Earth, you would become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as you approached it. And I mean, when you got to the center of the Earth, you wouldn't even be visible from the surface of the Earth. If you were on the surface, you would be smaller than tiny particles. But when you come out there, uh, it's the same universe, exactly the same. It is not different at all. It's the same stars, the same planets, same relationships, everything else. It's all the same. But it's infinitely small, whereas the other one goes toward infinitely large when you go off the surface. And this is the nature of the science that is underneath all of what we're looking at. The world doesn't know this. Pretty soon, you're not only going to know it, you're going to be able to go anywhere in the universe from within your own body, and be anywhere and be able to survive anywhere, no matter what it is. You could even go inside suns and plant things that you would not normally think, because it's all because of our understandings of what we think things are now. We've got a big surprise ahead of us.
It sounds like we do, yeah.
It's a really big one, but it's a good one. This is not scary or bad or anything to be afraid of. This is something to be excited about, really, because we're going to discover who we really are and what life is really all about. And this is a beautiful thing that's about to happen here. And I'm not the only one. Right now, there are 200. Last count was 250, but there's somewhere between 250 and 300,000 ET cultures that are here on Earth right now. And those are basically ones that have just made the decision to come here and be human and to come in here. But the whole universe is watching us. They are excited, because as we evolve, they're going to evolve, because we are bringing everyone with us. And we weren't certain of that until maybe 100 years ago. But at this point now, there's no doubt whatsoever. Humanity is doing something extraordinary.
Now,
It doesn't look like it with all the wars going
yeah,
on.
but now when you were talking about all these numbers of ET species, so to speak, do
Yeah.
you mean ET species being incarnated in the flesh, looking human now, or do you mean ethereal beings, or maybe living in the inner earth, or maybe a combination of all those things?
Well, actually, there's probably people that are actually on the Earth right now. There's probably far more than that number. These are races that have actually traveled to here and are sitting here. They're sitting on the fourth dimensional level of the Earth. And they are, if you could see the fourth dimensional Earth, the sky around the Earth at that point is just it's like a Rams parking lot or something. I mean, it's just they're just crammed all around. There's no more room left for them to park anywhere. They're all pulling in here, because this is what's going on here is for sure the most important event in the universe right now, and everybody's here. They can't get any more there. They won't even allow any more to come in. But in terms of how many people have come in here, well, just look, we've gone from less than 1 billion people to almost 7 billion. Where do they come from? They're coming because they're just as excited as I am.
And what is the big event to them? Because it feels to me that you're talking about ETs which know beforehand what might at least be, well, maybe not the outcome of the event, but at least the start of the event. That they know something's happening. What's that something for us humans, so to speak? Well, I'm not sure if I'm human, but anyway, for humanity in general, for that event.
Well,
What's that event?
well, the event is a unfoldment of a certain kind of DNA that has never happened in here before, but it's a super fast evolutionary pattern We're in about a couple years. Could happen any minute, but according to the Mayan philosophy, but it could happen as late 2015. But it's going to happen any minute. And when it does happen, the first thing we do is we go consciously into the fourth dimension. We're in the third dimension right now, and in the fourth dimension, everything is entirely different. Colors are different. You won't recognize any of the colors you see. You won't even know they existed. It's kind of exciting in a way, and form and shape is different than what we're used to. So what happens is we're a baby when we end up and when we come out there, just like when we came into this universe in the third dimension, we came from somewhere else, and we entered into this world, and we didn't know anything that was going on because we were a baby. And but we grow, we get bigger, and we get taller, and we slowly assimilate everything, and we begin to understand what it is. That's going to happen again. We're going to die from the third dimension, and we're going to be born on the fourth dimension. And the key is to bring your body with you. This is what a lot of the religions were involved in. The Egyptians were totally fascinated, you might say, with mummifying the bodies and making sure that they get on to the next level of existence, because that body is so important. Or the Christians, rather, with resurrection with Jesus and him dying and then reforming his body and bringing it with him. The reason is because on the fourth dimension, when you die and bring your body with you, that body is an adult body here is a baby there. And if you don't bring your body with you, if you don't know how, then you go there, but you don't have your body, and you end up having to come back here and reincarnate. And that's the reason why we reincarnate. We keep reincarnating until we learn how to die consciously, which means bringing your body with you. And when you do bring your body with you, then you never reincarnate again. That's it. It's over. But then once you're there, you learn a lesson really, really fast, and you begin to understand that the external worlds and the internal worlds are linked together, and that whatever you think and feel is creating your world directly and instantaneously. Here you're doing the same thing, but the time lag is a little slow, and we don't pick it up real fast, but we are creating our lives right here, right now. We're just not really, most of us aren't aware of it. And you have the ability to learn how to change the external world. You can make anything happen in the outer world if you know how, and you can change anything. But in the fourth dimension, it's crucial that you figure it out really fast, because if you go into the fourth dimension in fear, what happens is you begin to create fear. And your world is fear, and that whatever it is that you don't want the most in your life is exactly what happens, and it throws you back into the third dimension. This is why Jesus said, "Many are called and few are chosen." But in this case, it's going to be different, because we're all going to be called, and every single last one of us are going to be chosen. We're all going to go. We're not going to. No one's going to be left behind. Not anybody. And it doesn't even matter how bad your body is. Your body could be just filled with cancer, and you don't even have any arms or legs or anything, and you'll be fine. The moment you get in there, you'll remember who you are, you'll remember the creation process, and you can just, with your own intention, you can create your body back into something beautiful. It's always at the beginning, the people almost always start working with their bodies because they want to make them healthier or prettier or stronger or whatever. But that only lasts a little while, and then the process of being born into a new world becomes more exciting than anything. And slowly, we're going to only spend about 2 years on the fourth dimension. And we grow, and our bodies get much taller. Females get to be about 10 to 12 feet high, and males get about 14 to 16 feet high. and you get this giant head, this huge head with a brain that's about 4 times as big as what we have now. And from there, with that new brain, we are able to understand the reality in a new kind of way that we're not capable of understanding here. And from there, that enables us to be able to go into the 5th dimension of the world of formlessness, where we don't have bodies anymore, and we begin to live in a different kind of way. And from there, we go through over 100,000 different ways of being formless. And slowly we reach into the next level of existence, which is what we're going to do. Usually this takes billions of years. It's not going to take billions of years. It's going to be kind of like a light streak. I can't even imagine it, really, because I've come down the other way, and it was so hard to get down here, and to go back in just a few years is just, it seems to me impossible, but I can hardly wait, really. I want to do this.
Is this similar to what people are experiencing when they have a near-death experience? Do you also go the other way around, but they have to go back to their physical bodies, which also brings pain, they are telling the doctors when they come back?
Well, in a near-death experience, and I've done several of these, you begin to go through, but unfortunately, if you don't really know how to die, and we've kind of lost that because of what happened about 13,000 years ago. Normally, we know exactly what to do, but we don't right now. And you go through there, and you go into various levels. Once you get past a certain level, you can't return. It's maybe not completely impossible, but it's almost impossible. It's almost as if you came out of your mommy's womb and now you're going to go back inside. It's not likely. And but once you get through this level, everything gets a lot easier. I mean, it gets very, very simple. Because we actually, inside of us right now, we have full memory and knowledge on a level that is really hard for us to understand. In our hearts alone, we have the full Akashic records of everything that's ever occurred or ever will occur. And if we knew how to get into there, we would have memory of everything that we've ever said or done, or not only here, but anywhere in the universe, wherever we've ever been. And so once this is opened up, and it's going to be opened up whether we want it to or not, it's going to open up very soon. Life, where most people are kind of just bored right now, and or the majority of them, or they're in fear, or they don't have food, or they're in illness and everything. All that stuff's over with. It's just all over. There's no more illness. There's no more death. There's no more pain. It's a whole nother level of existence, and it's just the beginning. And I don't know if I lost the train of thought there and all of that.
No, that's okay. Now, what is exactly, maybe, I hope you can explain, because I think it's so fascinating. What is facilitating these DNA changes, and also the opening up you just mentioned, which sounds inevitable but very positive. So what is facilitating this opening up you're talking about?
To go specifically to exactly what it is that caused this, we would have to go to another planet a long ways away from here, and I don't know if it's.
I'm not sure if I can record you off planet, so we have to check if that's possible.
Yeah. But it was just one man. This is on a kind of a human level of looking at it. It was just one man who thought of this idea of how we could do this thing. And it was the Syrian race that came here and performed an experiment on human beings that actually triggered this whole thing. But that's just the external level of it. The internal level of the whole thing is that there is ways of communicating throughout the universe that is instantaneous, like we were talking about before. And there are sources within the center of black holes that create these energy fields that trigger the cosmic DNA. So at certain times in certain places, the whole universe makes changes. And when they do, the old way just doesn't exist anymore. It isn't even there. When we leave the earth and we go to this another place, the earth is not even going to exist. It won't be. This is hard to understand, but it really all it is just consciousness. Everything is just consciousness. So it doesn't just. It could always be returned in a moment if somebody needed it or wanted it, but it won't exist. But so exactly what does it is it's the internal structure of a black hole, which is the infinitely small universe, is what's inside these things. This is where the key comes from, and it sends it out into the infinitely large universe of the stars and planets, and it's an intelligence. It's an awareness that is in all things, everywhere. You could call it God or the source, the creator, but it is. And the more you become aware of what this is, the more you become aware that you have an intimate relationship to this. Very, very intimate.
Okay, now after this show, we might call this special "Nothing in this radio show is true, but it's exactly how things are." Okay, now and
you
now
can see why he wrote
and now
that.
as Monty Python would say, and now for something completely different. Okay, we just talked about near-death experience. I'm always fascinated by the concept of the soul, and I believe a lot. Well, at least let me put it this way: a lot of multidimensional psychics, let's just call them. You know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
Talk about almost fragmentary aspects of the soul. So we always have the feeling when we have a mind, well, now we have to learn that we have a soul. And some of those psychics are telling, well, you know what? We have like a kind of family soul, or I'm sharing a little part of Maria Magdalena, and you have three parts of that. And of course, I'm joking a little bit now, but you understand what I mean. So
Yes.
how does this group consciousness at a soul level work, looking at it from a multidimensional perspective?
Well, to begin with, there is only one spirit. This one spirit moves through everything that exists on every level of existence, and all simultaneously at once. And that's really all there is. Spirit, what natives call great spirit, which is what we're referencing to. Great spirit uh, has the ability to break itself into many, you might say, little pieces of itself, and at the same time retain its unity of oneness. And so it depends on, like, on Earth, this is a very, very low life form. I mean, this is about as low as you can get, and still be self-aware in the way that we are. But there are life forms that are much, much higher and understand all these things in ways. But for us, when we come, if Great Spirit breaks itself into, say, two pieces, so that it can experience love back and forth to each other in that way, and that's a possibility. And so that's one of the possibilities that we have here. One way of looking at group souls is that, and this is only one way, but it is a way that does seem to be true from many people's viewpoint, is that souls or individual people, as they move from one planet to another or one way of existing to another, they tend to travel with other people, other parts, and there's usually about 32 people in a group. That's kind of the normal size. There's much bigger ones, there's much smaller ones. There are many that are five. The Pentagon, where you have either three males or two females, or three females or two males. That one is another one that is just everywhere. You'll see it all over the place when you start moving around. But these souls tend to marry, and they travel together. So if it's decided, say they're living on some other planet somewhere, and they decide to come to Earth, they come to Earth as a group, and they manifest into bodies here as a group. And very often they will manifest as a husband and wife. They'll have children, and the children are then they're part of that group. and they move through their evolutionary process here on Earth, where these same people, same spirits, same souls keep manifesting over and over and over to the same people again and again and again. This doesn't always happen. It isn't a law that it has to happen, but it's just that we fall in love with people and we want to be with them. And that's kind of what happens. Now, there's another aspect that a lot of the shamans, especially in South America, refer to. Whereas when we come here on this particular planet, things happen here that are hard. They're very painful. We have forgotten how to love each other and help each other and cooperate, and so the life gets very difficult. And so sometimes we somebody comes in and kills us, and what happens is part of our spirit might stay here and part of it might leave and go to another place just out of pain, and so we fragment ourselves. And over many lifetimes, most people have been here thousands of lifetimes, and over time, this happens so many times that we get fragmented, and we end up here in present day time in 2011, and we're only maybe 1/100th of who we are. The rest of us is sort of scattered around all over the place. And so the shamans will go in there and they'll do all these ceremonies and they will personally go out and find them in different places and bring all these fragments back until you're a whole person again. And that is a form of healing. They figure that when that happens, most of your diseases go away. And and then there's the opposite of that, where which we call entities, where here we are, say we do have all of our soul back, we're completely one soul, we're in our body, and then we do something. We could take heroin, for example. That's one of the worst ones for this. And what happens is at a very specific moment, usually during sexual energy, at the moment of orgasm, you open up, but you open up completely. And when you do, other beings can come in. And so disincarnated people or beings, or in fact, most entities are ETs, and they somehow got trapped here. It wasn't intentionally. And then they enter into that person. Well, now you got one person, but you got 1, 2, 3, and sometimes maybe 100 other people in there with you at the same time, and that's a whole nother kind of it's like the opposite of soul fragmentation.
Could this be related to what psychiatry, of course, with their short-sighted view of looking at things, might call dissociation or multiple personality disorder and so on? Actually more entities, or is this a different kind of thing?
Well, this is a really complex subject. I had to give a workshop on this a few years ago, and I had no idea how much I knew about it or how long it would take. And it took 3 days to put this out.
We don't have that one, or maybe you can help out a little bit. Yeah,
I know, but it is a very complex thing. To answer that would take about 20-25 minutes, because there are parts of us that we don't understand. A human soul is not one personality. We're actually 8. Every single person is actually 8 people, but the 7 of those people are usually invisible to us at all times, usually, and so sometimes, though, 1 or 2 or 3 of these parts of ourselves may come forth. And if they do, then once they've come forth, you can't stop them from coming forth after that.
To be specific, they are not states, emotional states, or whatever we're in.
No, they're actually
different persons.
They're the same spirit, but they're a personality. In other words, when we okay, I'll just quickly do this. The energy field that surrounds the body is a star tetrahedron, and it has 8 points on it. And depending on, and 4 of those ways of facing that is a female, and 4 of those ways of facing it are male. And so when you come to Earth for the first time and you choose to take a human body, First of all, you have to split yourself into two because you're coming almost always from a unity consciousness, and you have to physically break yourself into half in order to have polarity consciousness. So there's two of you on Earth. This is what soulmates are.
Okay.
And now let's just look at one of these halves of it. That one half, when it takes a life, one half will be male and one half will be female. Say the one that's female starts, and you're just looking at that one now. The female one um, has the star tetrahedron around their body is in a female pattern, and it's one of the four female patterns. And so for that, and now this is their first life on Earth. And so they grow up as a female, and whatever it is, wherever their life was, whether it's in Europe or Africa or China or the United States or wherever it is, uh, they develop a personality, and that personality uh, uh, becomes part of their memory bank and what is true. But the next time they die and they come back again, they can't be female twice in a row. It throws you out of balance. You have to then be male on the next one. And the next one, you develop a male personality, and which is completely different, totally different. Then you're in a different part of the world when you're growing up. You have different parents. You have a different situation, and so you like different foods, etc., and on and on. And then the next life you come in, you're female, and the star tetrahedron rotates to another one of the patterns, and then but again, you get another personality. At the end of that, and the Egyptians believed that you were not truly human until you'd had 8 lifetimes, because after 8 lifetimes, you then have developed these 8 personalities, and you're complete now. But then from then on in, every time you switch sexes, you have 4 choices to choose from, and you choose one. You make that decision. Well, you got to keep a balance, sort of a balance, but the problem is that we tend to like certain personalities more than others, and we choose certain ones more often than we do other ones. And over time, we end up with a grandmother. We end up with an older person, say 50. Then we end up with one that's in the 30, and then we end up with a teenager because we didn't like that personality very much. And these personalities are sometimes are able to come out during a lifetime, and then that could be the source of the multiple personality.
Mm-hmm.
And or it could be that you've taken on another person that's come into your body, and that could be the source of the personality, which doesn't have anything to do with you. So that's why I was saying it's more complicated than it looks.
And it's even more complicated if you look at the walk-in aspect of the possibility, right?
Well, the walk-in is simply a way of getting into a body. And really, I'm a walk-in myself. My first life, I was born. I've only had 2 lives here. My first lifetime, I was born to the Taos tribe in New Mexico, in normal conditions. And this time, I walked in on April 10th, 1972.
Yeah, please explain to the general listeners what that is. I know, but I know that you described it in your work.
Well,
yep.
Well, a walk-in is an ET. And they have to be 6-dimensional or higher, or they don't have the ability to do it. But you make the entryway through the 6th dimension of the Earth, and you choose a person. And in my case, I chose this person who, and I chose him not only for a lot of reasons, but part of it was because his education and a lot of things that he had, because when you get the body, you get all that automatically.
And also the karmic traces, right?
You have to accept the karma. You can't get away from that. So you have to accept the karma. And so so I knew exactly when he was going to die, and precisely to the minute. And I started talking to him 9 years before. So he was getting used to me, and I was helping him on a lot of things that I wanted him to know when I got in, really. And then when he died, he breathed out, I breathed in, I fixed his body from what caused him to die, and then continued on. And what that does, it saves me a lot of time. He was 30 years old, and approximately 31 years old, and it enabled me to spend more time on the fourth dimensional of the earth with the ascended masters, understanding what was going on here. And I spent a lot of time with them and not so much on earth. And then I just sort of jumped into this body so that I would be here at this time, because I knew this is the time when it was important.
So you were not cheating on your exam because this was a cosmic contract with the guy you walked in, right?
Oh, yeah, you have to ask permission. If you don't ask permission, that's illegal, and you will pay for it. But it's just like you don't mess around with planets without permission, and you don't mess around with people. You're not supposed to, and you have to obey those laws, or eventually they will find you, and it's not a good thing that if they do that. The universe does punish people. They don't punish it in the way that we think.
Action reaction, so to speak.
It isn't about hurting or harming. It's just about education.
Okay. Now, I'm not sure if this is related to what you just said, but talking about possession or maybe having a demon and a poltergeist phenomena, maybe we go too deep into this now, but is this also related to maybe a walk-in or an entity trying to get in without permission, or is this a different kind of phenomena?
The procedure of getting in is the same in both cases. There's a spot directly at the back of your neck. There's a soft spot. There's a little bone. There's a little kind of a hollow place there. That's a chakra point, and there's a tube of light that comes out there at that point. And so entities, they usually wait till the person is intoxicated somehow. Either they're drunk, and I mean really drunk, not just a couple beers or wine. They're really loaded. Or it's a certain drug. It's the pleasure drugs that do it. It's the heroin, the cocaine, the crack, and these kinds of things. Other kinds of like psychedelics do not do it at all. So it depends on what it is, but that's usually how they get in. Another one that happens all the time is surgery. People go in for surgery and then they're put under through drugs. And at that moment is when these entities come into them. It happens
because of the anesthesia. That's a portal.
Yeah, that's right. I've sat and had long discussions with 5 anesthesiologists who were also psychics and can watch these things going inside them. And that's why they came to me to study what to do, how to stop that. And it's pretty easy to do. But the anesthesiologist has to know something of how to block that. Otherwise, they just come in. So a lot of times you get people, they're just, sweet older people who haven't done drugs or anything. They've done nothing like that at all. And they have a surgery and they end up with something inside of them and it messes up the rest of their life. And so it's kind of a sad thing, but it does happen.
And what about when people are talking about implants? Is that a real thing, or is that a physical thing? Is that an energetic thing? Is that a real thing at all?
Yes.
Okay.
There are all kinds of implants. Unfortunately, with humanity, our first contact with ETs was with the Greys and with the reptiles, and those guys actually wanted to eliminate human life off the earth totally. And they had good reason. I mean, if you know the whole stories about it and what went on and we did it to them. But still, the Greys no longer want to do that, but the reptiles still do. We're still at war with them. And but they both of those races use implants. The Greys' implants are physical. They're usually made out of a metal. And they're usually they can put them anywhere, but they generally put them up the nose, and because it leaves no mark. And that's one way of doing it. And what it does is they're just like computers. Those implants, they do different things. Some of them may be using just to watch the behavior. Some of them may be trying to change the behavior. They have all different kinds of reasons for doing those things. A lot of the implants, for a lot of them are psychic. You might say they're not. They're etherical. They don't actually have a physical component. But and usually the people using those kinds generally are not having. They don't have any negative. Reason for doing so. They're just trying to understand things a little bit. And but at this moment right now, we are being messed with by other races a lot. And it's
And do you know the reasons they do that?
well with the Greys, they were doing it because the Greys came here. Well, you see, we did something in a long time ago in the time of Atlantis, where we set up a merkaba field that went out of control. It was in Atlantis was. That part of Atlantis was near Bimini at that point, and the pyramid that was built is now on the floor of Bimini, under the ocean there. And that pyramid, that Merkaba field is out of control. And that's what's causing all the problems that are in the Bermuda Triangle. Anytime it's rotating counterclockwise, everything's fine. But when it goes clockwise in female direction, that's when all your space-time dimension things begin to happen and everything goes weird. Well, that as above, so below. Whenever you do anything on one level, it affects everything on another level because they're intimately connected.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was areas in the Greys were living near the Crab Nebula, which I talked about, behind the star in Orion.
Yeah.
Because they've been trying to study how to go into through that portal. They never will be able to do it, unfortunately, not ever. And but then we did something else, and that was in 1945. We blew up an atomic bomb, and this was not a bomb based on fusion, but it was based on fission. Well, fission is illegal. That's splitting things apart,
Mm-hmm.
and that's illegal everywhere throughout the universe. And what happened is we actually destroyed over 100 planets that belonged to the Greys. And so they came here to stop us.
Were these physical planets or planets on another dimension we
No, they're
cannot even see?
physical. They're
Whoa.
physical planets. I mean, it was just unbelievable what happened, and we did it. And so they came here, and they went back in time to about 1910, 1911 when they first came in here, and they tried. And there's only certain times when they could make these changes, and that time was in 1913, and they prepared the experiments to try to stop what was going on with the Merkaba field, which was amplifying with the atomic explosions, and it didn't work, and it actually caused World War I in 1914. This is our belief, anyway. And then the next time was 1943, when the time would come back around, and that's when they started doing the Montauk experiments.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing that through the Greys were leading them, and Tesla, which you talked about, he even said so. He said, this is I got all my information from the ETs. He was joking, but he wasn't joking. That's where it came from. They were giving us all this technology in exchange for allowing us to do certain things to the human race, and that ended up. Because of the way it came down, it had a lot to do with what happened in World War II. Then it was in 1983, 40 years later, again, when the cycles came back around, and it just continued. Finally, in 1993, the Greys did an experiment that was able to keep the spin moving only counterclockwise out of control Merkaba in Bimini, and since that time we've had no any kind of strange things happening in the Bermuda Triangle because they've actually controlled the speed of that Merkaba, which is pretty good. And so.
Okay.
Now, where were we going with this?
We're going everywhere, Drunvalo. Infinite
I,
consciousness,
I,
I guess.
I know this is like tennis. You're throwing balls at me, whack, 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 hitting them back.
Well, at least I hope you like the game so far.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, otherwise I'll slow down. Maybe it's interesting. Well, I've had this secret space program this weekend. I started the introduction, so you heard, and we were talking about, well, of course, the Illuminati came by, the New World Order, secret space program, NASA, never a straight answer is lying, and disclosure is maybe imminent, and there are many, many, many ETs. But a lot of people know about the Bilderberg and the Council of Foreign Relationships, and so those powers behind the scene, the puppet masters, but they are still earthly powers. Well, at least if they are human in a human body. But you talked about World War One and World War Two, so a relationship with the Greys. Is this because they were working with these sinister forces, so to speak, to earn money or geopolitical power, or were the Greys related to those incidents, those wars, in a different kind of way, working
Well,
together with powers that
this
be?
is
Or
this is a
yeah,
huge subject, and again, it would take a long time to really explain it.
I have to do a radio
But
show of two days.
but
That's better. Yeah.
but the secret government, which is about just a little less than 300 families, and then aided by about 10,000 people that run most of the corporations in the world and everything, they're not really human. They're in human bodies, but they arrived here about 65,000 years ago, and from Mars. They literally came from Mars, and they came from their past uh, into our future. Is that how it is? No, wait a minute. They're coming more. No, excuse me. It's the other way around. They're coming from the future, going back into the back into the past. No, sorry. It's the other way around. Sorry. They were coming into the future from where they were then to escape what was going on Mars, because there was a war going on Mars that was incredible.
Okay.
And this is, even in my book, we talk about how Mars, way back we were talking about this in the 80s, how Mars was a planet that looked exactly like Earth, very, very similar, with oceans and rivers and trees and plants and everything. And then the wars that they caused from that blew away their atmosphere and dried up the whole planet, and they just lost it. And when they did, to escape all of that and what was going on there, they came to Earth a long time ago, during the time of Atlantis, when it was first being born. And they gained control over Atlantis also. And because they're a lot more evolutionary advanced than the human beings that were here on Earth, it was easy for them to control us. And all the way up until now, they still are. But in terms of the race, with the space journeys that we've had from NASA, the what's going on there is that in the 60s, they found out and realized that that they needed to escape the Earth, because they believed that the Earth was going to go through a physical pole shift, and that it would mean just unbelievable destruction on Earth. With there wouldn't be hardly a building left standing if this was the truth. And so they built an underground city between Italy and Switzerland, down in those mountains. They go 10 miles down in those mountains, and it's a city with technology that we wouldn't even believe it if we saw it, and preparing for that. But at the same time, when they started building that city, they also wanted to go back to Mars from their home thing, and figured that it would be safer there. And that maybe that's what they wanted to do. So they did both things at once. And what they did is they got the United States and Russia into a moon race to get to the moon. And they used the science from both the United States and Russia and pitted themselves against each other, and their money and our money and their money, to do this. And so when we got to the moon, the United States went there 6 times, and then we've never been back since.
Mm-hmm.
Russia has been there over 2,000 times, and probably by now it's around 3,000 times. They built 3 cities on the backside of the moon. One of those cities collapsed, and it was horrible. But the reason for building those cities back there was so that the secret government would be able to then launch ships from those places, use the moon as a
In between station.
Yes, exactly. So they could get to Mars easily, and they did. And they went there, and they built underground cities there also. And it's complex. And if you go into Zecharia Sitchin's work, Genesis Revisited, he captured some of the film that came back from one of the satellites that we sent there, and right as it turned and looked down at Mars, and it was only just 100 miles above the surface or so, maybe it wasn't even that far. With the cameras that they had, you could actually see there was an airstrip there, and everything. That was where they were landing and building the things. They just happened by luck to do that, and you can actually see the photograph. And so anyway, they now have finished this project. They've done all of that, and what's interesting is the secret government thought that most people of the 300 families would want to go back to Mars. As it turned out, almost none of them did. They all decided to stay here.
They
Which is
enjoyed it. They enjoyed the power game here.
Well, they've been here so long that they just didn't want to do it, and so it's kind of funny. We spent all that money, we did all that stuff, we did all to get to Mars and everything else, and we didn't really use it.
Well, what's also funny, I just had this secret space program. I talked to Richard Dolan and did an interview with him, and also Richard Hoagland today. I told you because I was late. I was late with traffic because of that interview.
Yeah,
and
it's okay.
So it's okay. You forgave me already. Okay.
Yeah.
But they are talking in a way about a breakaway civilization, and indeed underground bases, or buildings and ruins on the backside of the moon and on Mars. So basically these guys are researching this as from a more human perspective, also some multidimensional physics and torsion physics. But they are right in a way. There is a breakaway civilization. There are all these bases on Mars and the moon, and probably other planets as well.
Well, we've tried other planets. It's pretty hard. Most of them are pretty difficult to live on. But Mars is it's possible there, but you would have to be underground and or in buildings that were super insulated. But you see, the secret government has had access to all of this technology that the different ETs have come here with, and they have implemented this technology.
Reverse engineering, is that the word?
Some of it's reverse engineering, and some of it they just gave it to them straight.
Okay.
Told them how to do it.
Okay.
And they now have spaceships that could go between here and Mars as super easy, super easy. It's just like taking a drive, a trip to LA or somewhere. It's not very. It's easy to do. These ships can go right through solid rock. They have learned a lot. Their technology is to the point where it was actually a long time ago when they lost it through war. But and all of this is tied back to the Greys because the Greys are interconnected with the original Martians that came here in the first place. There has been 4 times during this since this creation of this universe was created that life has attempted to create a separate reality from nature. And the first 3 times that it happened was devastating to many places. The last time, the third one, Mars was one of those planets, and it lost. It killed the planet. What they were trying to do. The reason they went to war was because they took away their female side. This is what the Greys did. This is what the reptiles did. They took away their female side so they were totally male. And they did that so they could be fantastic fighters. They don't get emotional when they kill somebody or something. They don't feel anything. They just go for it.
No empathy, just win the game. Yeah.
Yeah, just go for it. And it's like playing a video game. They don't feel anything. And that has caused huge problems, but it's what destroyed Mars, and it's why they came here in the first place. And now the Greys, when they came here, again, they have this same thing within them, is that they're only male. So when they want to reproduce, they have to do it through science. They use it through test tubes, and they collect the sperm, and they do this whole thing, and then they make the babies in ways that are we would just say just pure science. And and this has created a race that is what's going on. I'll just bring it into another thing, which is all the cattle mutilation. You remember,
Mm-hmm.
and all the abductions of human beings all over the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Why that was going on was they got here in 1910, 1911, but about in the 1980s is when they discovered that something else was going on in the universe, which is what I was talking about, where there is the longest cycle in existence, you might say, is about to end, the beginning and end of creation. And this universe is about to go away, and we're about to move to another one. But in doing that, you have to pass through a void space that separates those two universes from each other. And that void space will not allow anything physical to go through it at all. Only spirit can move through that. You cannot bring any object or anything that is from one universe to the other. And if you're a technological race like the Greys, where um, you don't have any feminine side, you can't create a living merkaba field, which is necessary to make those kind of transitions. You only have science. And so they have spaceships that can go through all 144 dimensional levels, but they can't go to the 145th. They can't get to the other side.
The new creation, not the new phase, but
Yeah,
the new creation. Okay.
the new creation. And when they realized that, that's when they started abducting human beings, and for the purpose of taking our emotional body and blending it with their mental, with their brain, their memories, and their emotion, and their wisdom, and everything else, and linking the two of us together to create a third race. And in doing that, they studied cows, because cows are so close to us. We eat them so much that the relationship is very, very close. And so they did what was called cattle mutilation, but which was really very, very, very high level laser technology surgery that only 5 people in the world at that time were able to do. And that was Linda Howe, who with ABC, who
Oh yeah,
did it.
Linda Moulton Howe. Yeah.
Yes, of course. And she was the one that realized that whoever was doing this was not human, because there weren't enough human beings on Earth that could do this. And so they did all of that, and they did create a third race, and that third race does able to make it through to the next universe, but the Greys themselves cannot. They just go back.
Only their hybrid offspring, or so.
Yes, but their memories and their understanding and their knowledge and everything else does survive through another body that doesn't look like them or like us. They're very tall and skinny.
Okay. Now,
And
is David Icke also? You mentioned the Greys, and I talked to David Icke about reptilians and other things, the holographic universe and the metaphysical universe, and many related concepts. Is he complete, in your opinion, of course? I mean, everybody has his own opinion and his own vision on reality. But is he right with the reptilians and the royals? Like you said, they're actually
well,
from Mars, or do you differ from his opinion?
well, no, they have infiltrated into most of the governments. This is not the Greys, but this is the reptiles.
Yes, yes, yeah.
They are able to literally change form. So all they have to do is just kill the other person, or detain them somehow, and they can just change their shape into a human body shape, and you can't tell them apart. There are certain things you can tell, and if you were living with them on a daily basis, you knew just a little bit, you would be able to prove that who they were. But in the kinds of ways that we get to see these kind of celebrities and people, you don't see them enough to be able to know very often. But yeah, I agree with him. They've done a lot of this, and it's part of the problem. However, the Greys, the reptiles do this every time we reach this point where we reach the end of the precession of the equinoxes every 13,000, little less than 13,000 years. Uh, uh, they try to take over the Earth. This is not associated with the evolutionary pattern that I'm talking about. This is just what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And you can even go back into Hermes 2,000 years ago in Greece. And he writes about this, and he says how that they do this, that these ETs come in at periodic periods, and they try to take over the Earth, and every time they lose. They've lost thousands of years. They've lost this war, and they're almost ready to lose now. About 90% of their fleet, and their fleet are these huge ships that are 50 miles long or more, and they're black and kind of flat with these different shapes and sizes that come around them, but they're very deadly things. And about 90% of their ships have been destroyed. We as human beings have destroyed them because there are human beings that we don't know about that are incredibly powerful. And with their inner work and through their meditations and through their knowledge of creation, have been able to defend this world. And there's one particular person, a woman, who was only, I think, 23 years old when she took this on, is the primary person who has defended the earth with the Greys. I mean, with the Greys, but primarily against the reptiles. And we are in the last few months, if not very soon, the reptiles and the Greys are going to be a thing of the past. They're not going to be here anymore. When that influence goes away, governments will be able to come back together in a much easier way and function together. We don't have all this interference taking place. And but I mean, you can believe it or not. But I have had first-hand direct connection to this, and I've seen myself for sure. It's not a theory to me. I know for sure.
Now, like I said, nothing in this radio show is true, but it's exactly how things are. No, I'm kidding here again, but just to create a small gap and a small break.
Well, sure. This is a very unusual thing. All this stuff is unusual to talk about, and I understand that. I do understand it.
It's so far off, but it might just well be true. So we just can. It's if it sounds far fetched, it of course doesn't mean it's not real, because we just realized we only have a small percentage of actual grasping reality, and we find out that reality keeps on changing because our perception of reality keeps on changing in our evolution. So that's obvious, I think, from even a human logical perspective. I want to go back to the merkaba because I think it's such an important thing. Not just the geometry, maybe some related questions about the merkaba, because there seems to be some controversy about should it go left, should it go right. I don't know about either way, but I think it's interesting that you state what the controversy is all about anyway.
Well, first of all, when I released this information to the world, I did it because I was instructed to through the Ascended Masters. And we did it in reverse. Usually, through all the trainings that have ever taken place before, everywhere, you start with the base chakra and you move up. And that's how it's always been done. And the last thing that is talked about is the merkaba. And that's true also even in Tibetan Buddhism. They're the only ones that have this knowledge fully intact. And you have to go through 14 lifetimes before they even mention the word merkaba to you. But we started with the merkaba, and in so doing, it caused all kinds of problems because you had thousands of people, and I mean that literally, that became teachers of the merkaba, but unfortunately, they just started changing everything. They started changing the shapes, they started changing the speed ratios, they started changing how they worked, what you would do with them, and everything else. And these were just egos, people who were just making this stuff up. And the thing is that the merkaba field that we're giving to you, it took well over 1 billion years of research throughout the universe to come up with a specific pattern and this specific way of doing it. And we lost planets. We actually killed whole planets because we didn't do things right. And it's a very, very dangerous thing. It's the creation pattern of the universe. You got to be careful what you're doing. And so the other reason that I'm trying to tell people is to stay with the tetrahedral merkaba, the one that we talk about in our book, is because that is exactly what the Earth has rotating around her. It's also exactly what all of the planets in the solar system are using, and it's exactly what the sun is rotating from. I've even got a photograph here, I don't have it now, but of the sun where you can see the solar flares going off all around the sun exactly at the 19.8 0.5 north and south latitudes, which is precisely where the star tetrahedrons cross the planet. You can see the star tetrahedrons on that day when that was taking place. And so the reason that you want to use this particular one that I introduced is because you want to be in phase lock with the planet and in harmony with her, because she is the one that's making the transition to the other world and bringing us with us. We're not doing it; she is. And if you're in exact harmony with the Earth's tetrahedral merkaba, then it's a very easy thing to do. If you have some other one going on around you, you better know what you better know what you're doing, or you're going to end up in some kind of overtone world for a long time until you can bring balance again into your life, because it's a very dangerous thing to do. I wish I could retract all of this and do it in the other way, but there's no other way. We had to do this way.
Interesting, because you mentioned the 1948 numbers. I found this in my search while writing my book, Blueprint, in the work of the book called Two-Thirds, and also Richard Hoagland in his book, what is it, Dark Mission, I believe. I just found out today because I looked into it. I also saw this 1948. So it's actually a coordinate number which represents the star tetrahedron. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what it's based on. Sometimes they say 49, they round it off, but that is the if you look at if you take a cube and you go across the diagonals of the cube and turn it with a point up and a point down, you'll actually see something different than a cube. You'll see a tetrahedron facing up and a tetrahedron facing down, and they're kind of immersed in each other. And so the flat surface that passes through the upper tetrahedron and the flat surface that passes through the lower tetrahedron, there's a sphere that will fit around that, and those two lines cross exactly at the 19.48 north and south latitudes of the Earth itself. And that's where you'll find most of your volcanoes. It's very active areas. Same way on Mars, that's where the biggest volcano in the solar system is located, exactly in one of those planes. And so, they're a key to tetrahedral geometry, period.
Okay. Now, if someone would say to you or ask you, Drunvalo, is the merkaba in a way our biofield or our light body? Would they be completely right, or is it too simple a representation, or many differences?
Well, it's much more. It is the creation pattern. When the Bible said God created man in His image, it wasn't the physical image of the body. I mean, obviously, you can look and you can see different kinds of human beings all around the world, and God made us all in that image. It's the energy field that surrounds and penetrates the body. That energy field is identical in all people, in all things. It is the creation pattern, and that is the image that we were created in His image. But that energy field, that is what the merkaba is created from. But there's over 100,000 different kinds of merkabas. We're not ready for those other ones yet. We're only on number 2 right now, and so.
Okay. Okay, now I want to go to a different part, because, like Monty Python, here we go again with my bad joke now for something completely different. When we did our talk before having this talk, which we're having right now, you brought in some new information I thought was very important. It was about the pole shift, or something with the pole, something changes which changes everything right now. So you were talking about something very specific for now, remember?
Yes, it's the magnetic field, the geomagnetic field of the Earth, and the solar flares.
Yes.
And what's happening right now. And this is important. This is something that people really need to understand, because it's going to affect them directly, and it is affecting you directly right now. I'll just give a very quick history so we can understand.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
The magnetic field of the Earth changes all the time. It has different it has different poles. It has a north pole sometimes becomes the South Pole. The South Pole becomes the North Pole, and this happens hundreds and hundreds of times before, over hundreds of millions of years, and so the I have to reference how to say this exactly. Okay, the magnetic field that we have now, that we're going through right now, about 2,000 years ago, made a significant drop in its weakness. It began to get weaker and weaker and weaker every single day, and this continued until about 500 years ago. The Mayans have it written in their calendar exactly when it was going to happen. And right now, I think it's about 528 years ago. And there was another really sharp drop, and it began to drop and get weaker and weaker and weaker. And that was the time when the Illuminati was born, by the way. And a lot of things began to take place then that was not positive for humanity. Spanish conquistadors and going out, a lot of things began to happen. Anyway, then about, I don't know, maybe 45 years ago or so, the anomalies began to get greater and greater in our magnetic field. The field was getting so weak that the lines began to change. The lines that had been fixed for so long, the lines don't just run a straight line up to from the south to the North Pole. They migrate up there. They're turning, moving, they're changing. But when about 45 years ago, they began to change, and it wasn't too long after that is when you began to see whales and dolphins beaching themselves on sand. And that's because they follow these lines for their migration patterns. As they're going down the coastline, they're following them. And then all of a sudden, one of these lines, which always continued on down the coastline, suddenly turns and goes right into the earth. And they follow it, and they go right onto the beach. And you saw birds all over the world now. They were migrating to places that they're not going to their migrating places.
Is this related to all the birds dropping and the strange incidents I just heard, the things dropping from the sky?
Yeah. I'm not sure what that is yet.
Okay.
I'm watching it. There could be a lot of answers. I don't know what the answer is to that yet.
Okay, let's skip that.
It's the same way with all the fish that are dying. That right before the Japanese earthquake, there was millions of fish died, swept up on the shore.
Exactly.
They don't talk about that. And the same thing happened in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago because they thought there was going to be a huge earthquake there too. But we don't know what that is exactly yet. They haven't figured it out.
Okay.
But with the migration patterns, they definitely know that that's what it is they're just following these lines that have been changed. Then about 25 years ago or so, well, no, not that far, somewhere in about mid-90s, the magnetic true north was the magnetic pole itself, which separated itself from the this actually happened 160 years or 180 years ago. It separated from the poles and began to migrate and get farther and farther and farther and farther away from the North Pole. And what happened is that now when you use your compass and you go, where's the North Pole? It's not pointing to the North Pole. It's pointing to the magnetic North Pole, which is not the true North Pole. Mm-hmm. And so airplanes couldn't land their airplanes anymore. They couldn't put them on automatic. If they did, they'd land out in the grass.
Everything is a little bit off, so to speak.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so they had to change all the aeronautical maps of the entire world. And they did that. Every single map was altered. Well, now, again, about a month or 6 weeks ago or whenever it was, you see this stuff where in Florida, they had to remap all the lines or remark the lines where they land on the airports because it's been moving more. When the geomagnetic field started moving a long time ago, it was just moving a few kilometers, and then they got up to like 15 and 20 kilometers and kept growing. It depends on who you talk to, but some people say it's 25, 30 kilometers. Some people say it's as much as 40 miles. I'm still not sure because there's so many conflicting scientific reports. But it's moving a lot, and right now it's entering into Siberia in Russia. And so this has caught the separation between the magnetic north and pole, and the physical pole is so great now that there are problems that are beginning to happen inside of human beings. And this is really interesting, and we need to understand this. The Just to understand what it is, if you have the physical pole of the Earth rotating, you have the entire mass of the Earth rotating around that pole, and everything's balanced. But when the magnetic pole starts changing, it goes off for a few hundred miles and it's off from the other one. Well, what's creating that magnetic pole, geomagnetic field, is the nickel core of the Earth. And that core has to be changing relative to in order to do that. So you have the inside of the Earth rotating in one way and the external part of the Earth rotating in another way. And this is causing incredible stress and pressure inside of the Earth. Another thing happened in the 90s also, which is NASA reported, nobody reported, no newspaper reported. They discovered that the nickel core of the Earth, which is a sphere, turned into a pentagonal dodecahedron. That's very interesting. But we don't know what it means yet. But so anyway, on a human level, they've discovered, because of this magnetic stress that's occurring, people are getting sick all over the world. And I don't have all the symptoms. There's about 35 symptoms that the medical community is discovering around this. But the first set of these symptoms has to do with balance. And people are finding or hearing ringing in their ears. And this has been going on for a long time, because these poles have been shifting for a long time. So for about the last 15 or 20 years, people have been saying that they hear this very loud ringing in their ear and it won't go away, or it'll come and then it goes away and comes and goes away. And there's more and more and more people. That's associated with the magnetic field of the Earth. They also, some people feel like these lines of energy shooting straight out of either ear, or sometimes they feel them going into the ear, or they feel a funny feeling or like an itching inside of their ear. This is being caused by the magnetic field of the Earth, is what they're saying now. And loss of balance or dizziness is also another one. Another one of the symptoms is where you're just standing, you're a totally normal human being, you don't have any problems, and your heart starts going faster and faster and faster, and pretty soon the beat of your heart is beating so fast that you lose consciousness because of it. And so there are things happening that are these symptoms are we need to understand them. And the next thing we need to do is what we're doing right now, is to learn how to bring these very strange things that's going on with people and bring them into balance, and know how to evolve with this pattern so it doesn't really hurt you. The end result of this, if you're not protected, is that the magnetics of the Earth not only affects balance and these kinds of things, it affects your emotional body deeply, and probably is the reason why the Arab world is kind of going crazy right now, because of the emotional impact that's hitting most people right now because of this. And there's more. The field, the magnetic field kind of passes right through your body, but it has a particular shape or a specific waveform or frequency. And when there is a solar flare, which we didn't have any solar flares for 4 years. It's the longest period of time that we've ever seen. The sun was very calm. And then on Valentine's Day, we had this huge solar flare. It was the fourth biggest one in history. And what I didn't know about solar flares is that they are magnetic in nature, and they take 8 minutes to get from not the mass and everything, but the energy, the frequency gets here in 8 minutes. Takes 20 minutes to go through our atmosphere to the surface, and then bam, like a lightning strike, it changes the entire shape of the magnetic field of the whole Earth. This is what NASA is saying right now. And so when a solar flare goes off, and under the conditions of where the magnetic fields are so stressed right now, and we're feeling them, when they go off, we feel this. We have an impact on our bodies and our emotional bodies and everything immediately, and it causes all these problems that we're experiencing all over the world. And right now you have many scientific bodies, as well as, I know Russia is for sure. Russia just announced to all of their people through their major newspapers that they listed all these symptoms, and they said, if you feel these things, just know that it's the magnetic field of the earth doing it. It's not your body. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just that it's the environment that you're in. In the United States, we never tell anybody anything like this. We should.
It is also important relating to the radiation levels now going on from Japan. Does the changes in Earth magnetics, does it also change the vulnerability, so to speak, to our immune system? It make it worse, or even offer protection in a strange kind of way? Because I think our immune system is also related to the electric body, so to speak, and electromagnetism and everything.
Yeah, it is, and it's definitely related to the emotional body. Almost all illness has a very powerful emotional component to it. It's what, we have divorces, we have things happen, and that ends up becoming cancer. But in terms of radiation and the magnetic fields, I don't know that question yet. I've thought of it, but I don't know the answer. And like a lot of people on the internet are saying, well, the magnetic the flares that are going off in the magnetic field that is being disturbed by it is what's causing the earthquakes, for example, that are happening. But science doesn't show that. They have over 1,000 examples of this in the past, and they can't find a correlation between them. Now, there may be, but we don't know. But there definitely, for sure, there is a relationship between human beings and what's going on with this magnetic field. And we really need to know how to respond to this. Personally, I feel that the response could be either negative or positive, meaning if you don't know it's there and you're just getting sick from it, that's a negative response.
Mm-hmm.
But if you understand that this is the cosmic DNA coming in here and changing the earth into another level of existence slowly, then you can use this with your merkaba field to make the change happen at a slower rate. In other words, you have every time the solar flare changes the magnetic field, if you do it instantaneously, it's making people sick. But you could track with that through your merkaba. This takes training, but you can do that. And in so doing, you can make the solar flare, the magnetic field change that took place instantly, take place over, say, 2 weeks, so that you have a much slower adaptation time to it and can do it easier.
So you keep phase locked in a way.
Yeah, you lock onto the line where it's moving to, and you move there, but you don't move there instantly. You move there a little slower so you can not get sick and have a heart that's beating at super speeds and everything else.
This is a smooth transition response.
Yes. And this is one way of dealing with these kind of changes that are almost beyond us. There is another one that I would like to say, and this has to do with the Mayans and the Hopi and the Kogi and the Arhuacos and many other natural tribes around the world. They know this is going on also, and they are happy to.
That was a great space sound. I'm not sure where that came from, but I heard a phone ringing 2 times. But this came from another dimension, I guess.
I don't know. I just turned it off.
Okay.
I should have got rid of these phones. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. It's okay.
And where were we?
The Mayans, the elders, the prophets.
Oh yes. The Mayans say that the way to make this transition, not only through the magnetic field, or if they think there's going to be a physical pole shift also, which would be incredible if that happens. And the way to do this is that you learn how to not live in your brain, but you learn how to live in your heart. And there are many people teaching this all over the world right now, so we can remember, because when we fell, the fall that the Bible speaks of and other things, from one way of looking at it is we moved from our heart to our brain, and we created an ego. And the ascension that many of the New Age people talk about now can be looked at in just the reverse, where we're leaving our brain and going back to our heart. And the heart is the older, more powerful source of everything within our body. And if we return to our heart, and what the Mayans say, if you then connect to the heart of the earth and to the heart of the sun, which is our divine mother and our divine father, that if we do that, that she will protect us. It creates a vibration within our spirit, within our being or our body, and this vibration is what they say is what she looks for. And when she finds people in that vibration that are in their hearts, she will take care of them. She will protect them through all these changes, and that they become the new humanity, the people that live in their hearts, not their brains. And that this is what it's all about from their point of view. Is that it's very, very easy. It's you don't have to know anything so much as. You don't even have to know the merkaba. You just have to.
So that leaves me out as a radio guy and an author and an organizer of events. Well, luckily I'm also doing some hard stuff. So that's not hard stuff with ARD, but EART, of course. No, I'm kidding here, but I'm thinking of a sentence. I believe I read it somewhere in a book. Here is not a mental thing coming, but it's related to the heart, and it said basically something like this: no negativity can reside when you're in a loving state. And I thought it was so powerful.
Well, my study through the different teachers I've had around the world is pretty much focused on the power of love and what it really is. Through this, I discovered that we have two emotional bodies. We have one in our brain and we have one in our heart. The one in our brain is polarized. There's love, and then on the other end of it is hate. But the one in the brain is not polarized. It has just oneness. And so
you mean the one in the heart is not polarized? Yeah,
it's not polarized.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't do any good to go into your heart and to go into love if it's from the brain. From my understanding now, you have to find your way into the heart and the love in the heart, which is where unconditional true love is. And if you get that, that's it. You don't have to do anything else. That is enough to for you to survive and become part of this new humanity. And it's really easy. It's just really simple.
Unless you have another phone going off. It's okay. Well, we've been talking for 2 hours. I think we wrapped everything up. We covered basically everything in this universe and maybe other universes as well. Is there something else you would like to say as a final comment? I mentioned your website, drunvalo.net. I know you also do courses and workshops, but you have facilitators doing those workshops right now. Do you want to talk about these Flower of Life workshops? Are there other workshops or things you want to mention?
We are changing the Flower of Life now. The Flower of Life Facilitator program is about to end, and a new one is about to begin because there's more information that needs to be known. And so the new one will be complete. It'll have everything. The merkaba is pretty limited by itself. It requires that it is connected to the brain in a certain kind of way, and from there to the heart, and then from the heart back to the brain. And there's an internal linkage that needs to be done. And when that is done, it's amazing. It is truly an incredible inner technology. And that is going to be taught with new teachers starting in July of this year. It'll be called Living in the Heart Teachers. And the school is called the School of Remembering. And we'll have about 200 teachers in there by the end of the year that will be in probably about 60 or 70 countries around the world. You just go to drunvalo.net, and on that and on that page, within about another 4 to 6 weeks, we're going to have all the school information and everything set up on there.
Okay, great. Also in the Netherlands, perhaps in the future.
There are teachers there in the Netherlands. They're all over Europe. They're in almost every country in Europe. Just
and they're also going to do the new program, because I know a few facilitators of Flowers of Life workshop, but they're also going to do the new stuff.
Well, a lot of them don't even know yet what's happening. But
Okay.
The old school is going to be shut down, and a new school is going to be formed. We haven't announced it yet because we're still forming it, but we will be, the first training will be in July. And by July, we'll have everything set up, and the old school will be shut down.
Okay. Old school is not is like it sounds. It's old school in these modern new times of new creation. Okay. Well, I mentioned the website drunvalo.net voor de Dutch audience. Voor de Nederlandse luisteraars, kijk ook even naar de boeken Geometrie van de Schepping, deel 1 en 2. I'm not sure who published this because I do not have them in front of me, but they're called in Dutch Geometrie van de Schepping. I think the English translation is different. Maybe you know, but there's a two-part book. I know you also wrote it.
Well, the first two books are called The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life.
That's it.
And
Okay.
Volume 1 and 2.
Yeah. And in Dutch they're called Geometrie van de Schepping. So I want to mention that for the Dutch audience. And the other book titles?
The third book is called Living in the Heart, and that one begins to complete the first two. And then there's a fourth book called The Serpent of Light, and that one is unrelated to those first three. It is the movement. It's the story of the indigenous tribes and the movement of the Kundalini of the earth from Tibet into South America.
Okay. Well, I'm going to make some finishing comments. Maybe I'll leave you with some closing remarks if you want, if we did not cover everything. We covered a lot, I think. But this is John Consemulder signing off for Healing Sound Movement Radio. This was a quite fascinating and special radio special with Drunvalo Melchizedek. And as Bob Frisell used to say, nothing in this radio show is true. But it is exactly how things are. So thank you for your time, Drunvalo. Is there something you might want to add or comment with as the last comments for this radio show?
But just to the audience, don't worry about any of these things. Just believe in yourself. Remember your connection to God and to all life everywhere, and everything is just going to be fine. But it's going to be pretty exciting.
It sounds like a bumpy ride, but we're going to make it, and that's
for sure we're going to make it. We've already made it, actually.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you for your time, and maybe hold the line for just 1 minute, but I'm going to close the show at least now for now. So thank you for the time for the special, and listeners, if you want to listen back to this talk or other talks we've been having, either with for instance David Icke or Len Horowitz or Lynn McTaggart or Roger Nelson or Raymond Moody, and also some national Dutch guests, of course, go back to healingsoundmovement.com. So thank you, dear listeners, and speak soon. Bye-bye.
This is for all the children in the whole world. All the children sing out the song of life, of love, of joy, of freedom, for all the love, all the life. Live in peace, harmony. World, please shout.
I pray for the children. I pray for the child. I pray for my inner child. I pray for my child. I pray.
Free